I was sitting in my office, a typical evening spent going through emails when my phone buzzed. A message from Andrew, my best friend, popped up. I smiled, expecting some random joke or a plan for the weekend. But as I opened the message, my heart sank. "Hey, beautiful, last night was incredible. Can't stop thinking about you. Can't wait to see you again tonight." My mind froze. For a second, I thought it was a mistake, a prank maybe. But Andrew's number was unmistakable on the screen. My hands trembled as I stared at the words. The room felt like it was closing in on me, the air thick with an unbearable tension. Just as I was trying to make sense of it, another notification flashed on my phone. An incoming message from an unknown number. I hesitated, then opened it. What I saw next made my blood run cold. It was a series of photographs. Rachel, my wife, and Andrew, my best friend, together in ways that left nothing to the imagination. Their smiles, their closeness, it was all too clear. They were at a place I recognized, a spot where Rachel and I had once celebrated our anniversary. But this time, it wasn't me beside her. My heart raced as I scrolled through the images, each one a dagger to my chest. The ground beneath me seemed to crumble, my world collapsing in an instant. Rachel, my partner of 10 years, was having an affair with the person I trusted most. My mind reeled, trying to grasp this new, harsh reality. How long had this been going on? Why hadn't I noticed? Questions swirled, but there were no answers, only a deep, aching pain. I wanted to scream, to confront them both, to demand an explanation. But all I could do was sit there, staring at the damning evidence on my phone, feeling the betrayal cut deep. I had trusted them implicitly, and now that trust lay in ruins. Everything I thought I knew about my life, my marriage, my friendships, it all felt like a cruel joke. I was a fool, blind to what was happening right under my nose. The pain was overwhelming, a mix of anger, sadness, and disbelief, twisting in my gut like a knife. But underneath the shock and the hurt, something else began to brew, a cold, calculated rage. If this was the truth they had hidden from me, then it was time to rewrite the script. If they thought they could betray me and get away with it, they were sorely mistaken. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of my phone ringing. It was Andrew. My heart pounded in my chest as I stared at the screen, his name glaring back at me like a cruel joke. I hesitated, then answered. "Hey, man, are you busy? I can't remember much from last night," Andrew said, his voice cheerful, completely oblivious. I had way too much to drink. Did I do anything stupid? I could hardly believe what I was hearing. The man who had just shattered my world, who had betrayed me in the worst way possible, was casually asking if he had done anything foolish. The urge to scream at him, to expose everything right then and there, was overwhelming. But I bit my tongue. "No, nothing out of the ordinary," I lied, my voice steady, though my insides churned with rage. He laughed, relief is evident in his tone. "Good to hear. I've got this headache from hell. I don't even remember getting home." The absurdity of the situation was almost too much to bear. Andrew was completely unaware, as if nothing had happened. As if he hadn't just ruined everything. I clenched my fist, nails digging into my palm as I fought to keep my voice calm. "Maybe take it easy today," I suggested, forcing myself to play along, while every fiber of my being wanted to lash out. "Yeah, you're right. Anyway, let's catch up later, okay?" And with that, he hung up, leaving me in a silence that was deafening. The phone slipped from my hand, landing on the bed with a soft thud. My mind was a storm of emotions. Anger, betrayal, sorrow, they all mixed, leaving me paralyzed. How could he be so carefree, so utterly clueless, after what he had done? I got up and paced the room, trying to make sense of my thoughts. A part of me wanted to confront Rachel immediately, to demand answers, to end it all right now. But another part, the darker part, craved something else. Revenge. A simple divorce would never be enough. It wouldn't erase the pain, the humiliation. No, I needed to make them feel what I was feeling. I needed them to understand the depth of their betrayal and suffer for it. But how? How could I hurt them in a way that would truly satisfy this burning need for justice? I stared out the window, my mind racing with possibilities. Confronting them would relieve me temporarily, but it wouldn't be enough. They had taken something from me, something precious. My trust, my love, my sense of security. They had shattered my world, and I couldn't just walk away from that. I needed something more, something that would make them regret every single moment they spent together. I took a deep breath, my resolve hardening. Whatever I did next, it had to be perfect. It had to be something they would never forget. I wasn't just going to end this marriage, I was going to make sure they both paid dearly for what they had done. In the days that followed, I could feel the rage simmering inside me, just beneath the surface. But I didn't act on it, not immediately. Instead, I began to plot. If I was going to make them pay, it had to be methodical and calculated. I needed a plan that would hit them where it hurt the most, where their greed and selfishness intersected. One evening, while nursing a glass of whiskey, it came to me. The idea was so perfect, so deliciously ironic, that I almost laughed out loud. Money. It was always about money. Rachel had always wanted more vacations, more luxury, more status. And Andrew? He'd never been shy about his dreams of striking it rich, of living the high life. What if I could give them exactly what they wanted, or at least make them think I had? The plan began to take shape in my mind, piece by piece. I would create an illusion, a grand deception that Andrew had won a huge sum of money in the lottery. It was simple enough, but the implications were enormous. Rachel would undoubtedly gravitate towards him, drawn by the allure of wealth. She would think she had won the jackpot, that she could leave me for a man who was now fabulously rich. The thought of her abandoning me for what she believed was a fortune was almost poetic in its cruelty. But to make this work, I had to be careful. Every detail had to be perfect, every step meticulously planned. I couldn't afford any mistakes. I spent hours researching, learning everything I could about lottery winnings, how they were processed, and what documents were involved. Then I set to work, forging the necessary paperwork, fake tickets, bogus claim forms, even a convincing letter from the Lottery Commission. It was almost too easy. I could already see the look on Rachel's face when she found out. She'd be ecstatic, ready to run into Andrew's arms, believing she was trading up. And Andrew? He'd be none the wiser, too blinded by his greed to question the sudden windfall. He'd think he was the luckiest man alive when in reality, he was stepping into a trap of his own making. As the plan solidified in my mind, a strange calm settled over me. For the first time since that fateful morning, I felt in control. The pain of betrayal was still there, but now it was accompanied by a sense of purpose. I wasn't just going to let them destroy my life without consequence. No, I was going to make sure they both suffered for their deceit. I could hardly wait to see how it would all unfold. The first step was to craft the illusion of Andrew's sudden fortune. The fake lottery ticket was the easy part. I carefully replicated a winning ticket, selecting a recent lottery draw that hadn't yet been claimed. The numbers were right there, splashed across the news. Millions waiting for a winner. It was perfect. Next, I moved on to the documents, an official-looking letter from the Lottery Commission, complete with watermarks and signatures, and a claim form that appeared authentic down to the last detail. I even created a fake check, printed with a sum so large it would make anyone's head spin. The plan was almost complete. All I needed was the right moment to let it slip. Rachel had a habit of going through the mail in the mornings. She'd stand by the kitchen counter, casually sorting through bills and junk mail while sipping her coffee. It was easy to place the documents just so, hidden beneath a stack of magazines where they'd be discovered by accident. The next morning, I made sure to leave early, excusing myself with some vague reason about a work emergency. I kissed Rachel on the cheek and left the house, my heart pounding with anticipation. I could only imagine what would happen next. Later that day, when I returned home, the atmosphere was different. Rachel greeted me with a bright smile, her eyes sparkling in a way I hadn't seen in a long time. She was cooking dinner, something she hadn't done in weeks. There were flowers on the table, candles even. It was as if she was trying to recreate some long-lost domestic bliss. "Hey, honey," she said, her voice unnaturally sweet. "How was your day?" I played along, acting as though nothing had changed. "Busy as usual. What about you?" "Oh, nothing special. Just went through the mail and tidied up a bit. I might go see my mom tomorrow. You don't mind, do you?" She was lying. I could see it in her eyes, hear it in the forced lightness of her tone. She had seen the documents. She knew, but she was trying to hide her excitement, her sudden interest in me, a man she had grown distant from, because now, in her mind, she had a way out. Rachel tried to be more affectionate and more attentive, but it was all an act. She still avoided eye contact, her smiles didn't quite reach her eyes. I watched as she pretended, as she played the role of the loving wife, all the while planning her escape. She thought she was clever, but I could see right through her. Every touch, every kind word was laced with insincerity, with the hope that soon, very soon, she'd be able to leave me for Andrew and his newfound wealth. But that was exactly what I wanted. Let her believe in the dream of easy money, let her think she had won. Soon enough, she'd realize the truth. And by then, it would be too late. Dinner that night was a quiet affair, with Rachel chattering on about trivial things, while I nodded along, lost in my thoughts. I wondered how long she would keep up the charade, how long before she made her move. But one thing was certain, Rachel had taken the bait. And now, it was only a matter of time before she and Andrew would face the consequences of their betrayal. I knew that the next step in my plan was to bring Andrew into the fold, to make him believe in the fantasy one had crafted. He was the key to making this whole deception work, and the irony of him falling for it was almost too delicious to bear. We met at our usual spot, a small bar downtown where we had shared countless drinks and stories over the years. As I walked in, I saw him already at the bar, nursing a beer and looking every bit the carefree, easygoing guy the first had always known. It took everything in me to suppress the rage that flared up at the sight of him. But I forced myself to smile and walked over. "Jacob, over here," he called out, raising his glass. I took a seat next to him, ordered a drink, and made small talk for a while, carefully steering the conversation towards money. Andrew had always been open about his desire to strike it rich, and tonight, I was going to give him exactly what he wanted, or at least, what he thought he wanted. "So," I said, lowering my voice as if I were about to share a deep secret. "You won't believe this, but something incredible happened." Andrew raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Oh yeah? What's up?" I pulled out the forged lottery ticket from my pocket, sliding it across the bar towards him. "I hit the jackpot, man. Look at those numbers." He picked up the ticket, his eyes widening as he compared the numbers to those in his memory. His face lit up with disbelief and excitement. "No way. You won?" I nodded, playing the part of the humble, overwhelmed winner. "It's crazy, right?" I couldn't believe it myself. "But here's the thing, Andrew, I don't want to deal with all the attention, the media, the hassle. I just want to get the money and split it quietly. And I want you to have half." His jaw dropped. "Are you serious? Half?" I nodded again, watching as the idea took root in his mind. I could see the greed flicker in his eyes, the wheels turning as he thought about what he could do with that kind of money. He didn't even hesitate before agreeing. "Of course, man, we've been through everything together. I've got your back, whatever you need." I smiled, but it wasn't a smile of friendship. It was the smile of a man who knew he had his enemy exactly where he wanted him. "Great," I said, clinking my glass against his. "We'll keep it between us, no one else needs to know. I'll handle the paperwork, and when the money comes in, we'll split it 50-50. Sound good?" Andrew nodded eagerly, completely oblivious to the fact that he was walking right into my trap. He was so consumed by the prospect of easy money that he didn't question a single thing. As we talked, I kept feeding him details about how we'd manage the winnings, how we'd keep it all under wraps. The more I talked, the more he believed, and the more he believed, the closer I got to exacting my revenge. By the end of the night, Andrew was fully on board, grinning from ear to ear as he envisioned his new life of luxury. We parted ways with a handshake, a gesture that once symbolized our friendship but now felt like sealing a deal with the devil. I watched him leave the bar, the smile fading from my face as soon as he was out of sight. He thought he had just made the deal of a lifetime, but little did he know, he was merely a pawn in a much bigger game. And the game was far from over. The tension between Rachel and me had been building ever since she discovered the lottery documents. Her smiles became less forced, her tone sweeter, as if she was trying to butter me up. But I knew her too well. Beneath the surface, I could see her calculating and planning. She was waiting for the right moment to make her move. That moment came sooner than I expected. It was a quiet evening at home, the kind of night where we would usually settle in with a movie or sit in comfortable silence. But tonight, Rachel was restless. I watched her pace around the living room, her eyes flicking towards me with an intensity that made my skin crawl. Something was coming. I could feel it in the air. Finally, she stopped pacing and turned to face me. "Jacob," she said, her voice trembling just enough to make it convincing, "we need to talk." I put down the book I was pretending to read and met her gaze, feigning confusion. "What's on your mind?" She took a deep breath as if gathering the courage to say what she had been rehearsing. I've been thinking a lot lately, about us. About our marriage. I stayed silent, letting her words hang in the air. This was it. I don't think we're happy anymore. We've been drifting apart for a long time, and I don't want to keep pretending everything is okay. I nodded slowly as if processing what she was saying. In reality, my mind was racing. I could see where this was going, and it took everything in me to keep my expression neutral. I think it's time we go our separate ways, she continued, her voice steadying now that she was finally getting the words out. I've decided to leave, Jacob. I've found someone else. There it was. The truth was finally laid bare between us. She wasn't just leaving me, she was leaving me for Andrew. And all because she believed he was now a millionaire. I looked down, pretending to be crushed by the revelation. Is it Andrew? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Rachel hesitated, but then she nodded. Yes, it's Andrew. I didn't want it to happen this way, but I love him, Jacob. And we both know things haven't been right between us for a long time. I forced myself to look up at her, meeting her eyes with a mix of pain and acceptance. If that's what you want, Rachel, then I won't stand in your way. A flash of relief crossed her face as if she hadn't expected me to let her go so easily. Thank you, she said, almost too quickly. I know this is hard, but it's for the best. I nodded again, biting the inside of my cheek to keep from smiling. This was the moment I had been waiting for, the moment she revealed her true colors. She thought she was leaving me for a better life, for a man who could give her everything she ever wanted. But soon, she would realize just how wrong she was. Rachel packed her things over the next few days, moving with a purpose that only confirmed her intentions. She was eager to start her new life with Andrew, eager to cash in on the future she thought was waiting for her. The day she left, I stood by the window, watching as she loaded the last of her bags into her car. She didn't look back as she drove away, not even a glance. It was as if our life together had already been erased from her mind, replaced by dreams of wealth and luxury. As I watched her car disappear down the street, a bitter satisfaction settled over me. The plan was working. Rachel had made her choice, and now there was no turning back. She thought she was leaving me behind, but in truth, she was walking straight into the trap I had set. And soon, both she and Andrew would realize that their betrayal had come with a heavy price. Rachel had been gone for a few days, and the house was quieter than ever. I had expected to feel a sense of loss, maybe even regret. But instead, I felt nothing but a cold, calculated satisfaction. The first part of my plan was complete. Now, it was time for the rest to unfold. I didn't have to wait long. One afternoon, my phone buzzed with a call from Andrew. I stared at the screen for a moment before answering, already anticipating what he might say. Jacob, he began, his voice unusually tense, we need to talk. Sure, what's up? I replied, playing it cool. Can we meet somewhere? I'd rather not discuss this over the phone. There was a note of urgency in his voice that told me everything I needed to know. The plan was working, and Andrew was beginning to feel the pressure. Of course. How about the bar? Yeah, the bar's good. I'll see you there in an hour. When I arrived, Andrew was already there, nursing a whiskey instead of his usual beer. He looked up as I approached, and I could see the strain on his face, the nervous energy that came from knowing something wasn't right. Jacob, he said, without the usual camaraderie in his tone. We've got a problem. I took a seat next to him, signaling the bartender for a drink. What kind of problem? He hesitated, glancing around as if to make sure no one was listening. I tried to cash the check, he said quietly. Went to the bank this morning. They said there was an issue with it. My heart raced, but I kept my expression neutral. An issue? What kind of issue? They said the check couldn't be processed, something about it not being in the system. They asked me a lot of questions. Jacob, too many questions. Did you tell them anything? I asked, leaning in slightly, my voice steady. Of course not, but something's off, man. This should have been straightforward, but now they're talking about investigating, about verifying the win. I didn't know what to say, so I just left. But Jacob, what if they find out? What if they realize it's fake? The panic in his voice was palpable, and I could see the fear in his eyes. The fear of being exposed, of losing everything. He was on the edge, and all it would take was a little push to send him spiraling into chaos. I placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder, playing the role of the concerned friend. Relax, Andrew. These things happen sometimes. The bureaucracy, you know? They'll sort it out. We just need to keep our heads down and let it play out. He nodded, but I could see the doubt lingering in his mind. He wanted to believe me, to trust that everything would be fine, but the seeds of suspicion had already been planted. And I knew it was only a matter of time before those seeds grew into something much darker. As we talked, I kept feeding him lines, reassuring him that everything was under control, even as I watched him slowly unravel. The beauty of it all was that he was trapped, caught between his desire to claim the money and his fear of being caught in the lie. And the more he tried to hold it all together, the more it would slip through his fingers. By the time we left the bar, Andrew looked no better than when he had arrived. He was a man on the brink, and the pressure was starting to break him. But that was exactly what I wanted. The cracks were starting to show, and soon enough, everything would come crashing down around him. And I would be there to watch it all. It didn't take long for the initial excitement of Andrew's supposed fortune to fade for Rachel. The euphoria of leaving me behind for a new life, coupled with the anticipation of wealth, was quickly overshadowed by an unsettling uncertainty. The grand promises of luxury and endless possibilities were becoming a distant dream. It started subtly. Andrew's frequent reassurances turned into evasive maneuvers. He would cancel plans and give vague explanations about dealing with paperwork or delays. The excuses were always just plausible enough to avoid outright suspicion, but increasingly frequent and inconsistent. Rachel's patience, once boundless, began to wear thin. I watched from a distance, savoring every moment as she grew more frustrated. Their relationship, once filled with excitement and hope, was now marred by mistrust and tension. Rachel started to pull away, her concern growing with each passing day. The lavish plans she had envisioned were replaced by sleepless nights and anxious phone calls. The more Andrew tried to placate her, the more she questioned everything. The growing rift between them was evident. Rachel's patience had worn thin, and Andrew's attempts to reassure her only deepened her doubts. The facade was cracking, and the illusion of wealth was beginning to crumble. I watched it all unfold with a mixture of satisfaction and cold detachment. The plan was working perfectly. Rachel was starting to see the cracks in Andrew's story, and the mounting pressure was beginning to reveal the truth. The endgame was in sight. The final act of this twisted play was approaching, and I was ready to see it through to its bitter conclusion. The tension in the apartment was almost unbearable. Rachel's constant questioning, Andrew's evasive answers, everything had reached a boiling point. Their once promising future had turned into a tangled mess of lies and accusations. It was a late evening when it all came crashing down. Rachel, on edge and desperate for answers, cornered Andrew in their living room. The room was dimly lit, the shadows lengthening as the night deepened, mirroring the growing darkness in their relationship. Andrew, Rachel's voice trembled with a mix of anger and fear. I can't keep doing this. I need to know what's going on. Either you show me the money or tell me the truth. Andrew paced back and forth, his hands fidgeting with the edge of his shirt. The stress was etched deeply into his face, and I could see the strain as he grappled with the mounting pressure. Rachel, I've been trying to explain, he started, but his voice wavered. No more excuses, she cut him off. Either you prove to me that this is real, or you tell me what's happening. He stopped pacing, his shoulders slumping in defeat. The facade had worn thin, and the weight of his lies was too much to bear. He took a deep breath, the confession looming large in his eyes. Okay, he said, his voice cracking. There's no money. There was never any lottery win. It was all a lie. Rachel's eyes widened in shock, her face turning pale. What are you talking about? I was scammed, Andrew admitted, his voice barely a whisper. Jacob, he set me up. He made it all look real, and I fell for it. I thought I was going to be rich, but it was all fake. Rachel took a step back, her hands flying to her mouth as the realization hit her. So, everything was a lie? The ticket, the documents, none of it was real? Andrew nodded, his face twisted with shame and frustration. I'm sorry, Rachel. I didn't know. I thought I was getting a chance to change my life, but it was all a trick. The room fell into a heavy silence as Rachel processed the truth. Her world, which had seemed so bright and full of promise, had crumbled into a heap of shattered dreams and bitter reality. Her gaze darted around the room as if searching for some sign that this was all a bad dream. How could I have been so stupid? She muttered, tears streaming down her face. I left Jacob, I left everything behind for this? Andrew reached out a hand, but she recoiled, her expression one of utter horror and betrayal. I trusted you, she said, her voice breaking. I trusted both of you. And now I have nothing. Her sobs filled the room, a stark contrast to the excitement and hope that had once defined their plans. The realization of her mistake was almost too much to bear. She had traded one form of betrayal for another, only to find herself empty-handed and alone. Andrew stood there, a figure of defeat, as Rachel's anguish unfolded. The lie that had seemed so harmless at first had become a full-blown catastrophe, and the consequences were now painfully evident. At that moment, as Rachel crumbled under the weight of her choices, I watched from the shadows with a grim sense of satisfaction. The plan had worked perfectly. The facade had been dismantled, and the truth had been laid bare. Rachel had made her choice, and now she had to face the consequences of her actions. The game was over, and the final act of this twisted drama had reached its tragic conclusion. I left the city under the cover of darkness, not a moment too soon. As the final pieces of my plan fell into place, I knew that my presence was no longer necessary. I had orchestrated a symphony of betrayal, and it was time for me to take my bow and exit stage left. Rachel's desperation, her frantic attempts to find me, only made the departure more satisfying. She wanted to make things right, but she had no idea where to begin looking for me. I had covered my tracks well, leaving no hint of where I might be. I had always been meticulous, and this was no different. I had planned every detail, every move, to ensure that I would vanish without a trace. The night I left, I made my way to the old, rusting van I had kept hidden in a garage on the outskirts of town. It was my escape vehicle, far from glamorous but functional. The roads were empty as I drove away, the city lights fading in the rearview mirror, a final reminder of the life I was leaving behind. I settled into the driver's seat, the weight of the last few months lifting from my shoulders. The tension, the lies, the intricate web I had spun, it was all behind me now. As I drove through the winding roads that led out of the city, I felt a strange mix of satisfaction and melancholy. I had achieved what I set out to do, but the emptiness of the open road reminded me that there was no turning back. Rachel had tried to reach me through every means possible, calls, texts, even emails begging for answers. I ignored them all, each notification a reminder of her futile struggle. I knew she would be devastated, grappling with the reality of her choices and the shattered illusions of wealth and happiness. I had given her a taste of her own medicine, forcing her to confront the consequences of her betrayal. But now, I was done. The satisfaction of her downfall was enough for me. There was no need to linger or revisit the past. I had made my point, and now it was time to move on. My destination was a small town far from the city, a place where I could start anew without the baggage of my old life. As I drove, I thought about what lay ahead, new opportunities, a fresh start, and perhaps a chance to rebuild my life on my terms. Rachel's attempts to locate me would likely be in vain. She had been caught in a trap I had set with precision, and now, her attempts to find me only served to highlight her helplessness. I had left her with nothing but the harsh reality of her decisions, and I had no intention of offering any resolution. The road stretched out before me, endless and inviting. I had left the chaos behind, and as the city lights disappeared from view, I felt a sense of liberation. My revenge had been exacted, and now it was time to embrace the freedom that came with starting over. As dawn broke and the first light of day touched the horizon, I knew that my past was behind me. The city, Rachel, and Andrew were all distant memories now. The road ahead was mine to shape, and I was ready to face whatever came next with a clean slate and a sense of quiet satisfaction. The days that followed were a blur of chaos and despair. The initial shock of Andrew's confession had been only the beginning. Rachel's frantic search for me turned into a haunting journey of self-discovery, only to lead her to the cold realization that I was gone. Vanished without a trace. It was as if I had never existed, leaving her grappling with the pieces of her shattered life. I watched from a distance, though I didn't need to. I could imagine her heartache and confusion with unsettling clarity. Rachel had once been so full of hope, her eyes shining with the promise of a new life. Now, all of that was gone. The dream of wealth, the allure of a better future with Andrew, everything had crumbled into dust. Rachel's attempts to piece together what had happened were futile. Her calls to me went unanswered, her pleas for explanation lost in the void. Andrew's disappearance was almost as sudden as mine, leaving her alone to face the wreckage of her decisions. She was left with nothing but the harsh truth of her situation. She wandered through the empty spaces of our former life, a ghost in the places where once we had built our dreams. The house that had once been a symbol of our shared future now felt like a prison, each room echoing with the memories of what used to be. The luxury that she had envisioned with Andrew was nothing more than an illusion. And now she faced the stark reality of her choices. Rachel was left alone, stripped of the comfort of familiarity, and engulfed in a sea of betrayal. The man she had loved, the friend she had trusted, and the dream of wealth that had seemed so within reach were all gone. The weight of it all bore down on her, and the emptiness was overwhelming. Her days were filled with a hollow routine, her nights plagued by restless dreams of what could have been. She had lost everything in one fell swoop: her marriage, her friend, and the future she had envisioned. The illusions she had clung to had been shattered, and now she faced the bitter reality of her own choices. In the quiet of the night, when the world outside was still, Rachel would sit alone, grappling with the enormity of her loss. The realization that she had been duped, that the life she had chosen was built on false promises, left her feeling raw and exposed. There was no escape from the truth, no way to undo the damage that had been done. Her heartache was compounded by a profound sense of betrayal, not just from Andrew and me, but from herself. She had trusted too easily, believed too readily, and now she was left with nothing but the remnants of her own misguided decisions. In the end, Rachel was forced to confront the full extent of her loss. There was no escaping the finality of the situation, no chance to reclaim what had been lost. The dreams of wealth and a new life were gone, and she was left with nothing but the emptiness of what could have been. The final reckoning had arrived, and Rachel stood alone, the weight of her choices heavy on her shoulders. The life she had hoped for was nothing more than a mirage, and the reality of her situation was a harsh and unforgiving truth. As I navigated the winding streets of my new city, the feeling of liberation was palpable. The oppressive weight of my past life, marked by deceit and revenge, began to lift with each mile I put between myself and the ruins of what had been. The city was a canvas of possibilities, its skyline a jagged horizon of new beginnings. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the cityscape when I arrived at a quaint cafe nestled between towering buildings. I had chosen this place for its anonymity, a retreat from the familiar faces of my past. It was here, in the gentle hum of conversations and the aroma of freshly brewed coffee, that I began to process what had transpired. Sitting at a corner table, I stared out the window, reflecting on the path I had taken. The satisfaction of executing my plan, of watching Rachel and Andrew grapple with their failures, had initially felt like a victory. But now, as the thrill of revenge faded into the background, a profound emptiness began to settle in. It was as if the victory had come at too high a cost. I had meticulously planned every detail of my departure, severing ties with old friends, and avoiding places where I might be recognized. My new apartment, though modest, was a sanctuary from my past. The walls were bare, the furnishings simple, a blank slate for my new life. It was oddly comforting to embrace the simplicity, to start from scratch without the baggage of my former existence. Days passed in a routine that was both mundane and soothing. I explored the city, finding solace in its unfamiliarity. Each street, each new cafe was a small adventure, a chance to distance myself from the shadows of betrayal. Yet, despite the new environment and the fresh start, there was an undeniable undercurrent of loneliness. Then, one crisp autumn afternoon, as I wandered through an eclectic street market, my path crossed with something unexpectedly refreshing. I had been aimlessly browsing the stalls, enjoying the lively atmosphere when I stumbled upon a small bookstore tucked away between two larger shops. Its wooden facade and inviting display of old books drew me in. The store was a charming relic of the past, with shelves overflowing with tomes that whispered of forgotten stories and unspoken histories. I wandered through the aisles, feeling the comforting embrace of the place, when I bumped into someone, quite literally. The collision was gentle, and I looked up to find a woman with warm eyes and an easy smile. Her presence was disarming, a striking contrast to the cold, calculated world I had been living in. We exchanged apologies and smiles, and as we began to chat, I found myself unexpectedly drawn to her. Her name was Lily, and she radiated a genuine kindness that was both soothing and surprising. We spoke about the bookstore, about our favorite books, and as the conversation flowed, I felt a flicker of something I hadn't experienced in a long time: hope. There was an effortless ease in our interaction, a sense of connection that felt both new and familiar. As we talked, I discovered that Lily was a local artist, passionate about her work and full of stories about the city and its hidden gems. She had a way of speaking that made the ordinary seem extraordinary, and her enthusiasm was infectious. It was refreshing to meet someone who embraced life with such openness and creativity. When we parted ways, exchanging numbers and promising to meet again, I couldn't shake the feeling of possibility that lingered. Just when I had resolved to remain distant, to guard myself from further hurt, I found myself intrigued by the prospect of getting to know Lily better. I knew that I needed to proceed with caution. The past has taught me valuable lessons about trust and vulnerability. I was acutely aware of the fragility of new beginnings and the dangers of repeating past mistakes. Yet, there was something about Lily that made me want to take a chance, to explore the potential of a new connection. In the quiet moments of the evening, as I settled into my new apartment, I thought about the irony of the situation. The pain of my past was still fresh, but here was an opportunity for something different, something that could potentially bring joy and fulfillment. The future was open, and for the first time in a long while, I felt a cautious optimism. As the city lights twinkled outside my window, casting a gentle glow over my new life, I realized that the road ahead was mine to shape. The past was a collection of memories and lessons, but the future held the promise of new experiences and the possibility of finding happiness once more. The journey was far from over, and the path was still uncertain. But as I looked forward, I carried a sense of hope and a readiness to embrace whatever came next. Whether with Lily or alone, I was prepared to face the future with an open heart and a renewed sense of purpose.